Hello, Dodger fans. It is World Series Game 1 day. Hope you're alive and feeling great. Well, I hope you're alive because that means you're watching this. But it is your boys Juan y Alonso, and we're going to preview this World Series matchup between the Dodgers and the Rays. In my opinion, the two best teams in all of baseball. We finally get that purist, if you will, matchup. How are you feeling going into Game 1, Juan?
I think finally the excitement of that Game 7 victory has worn off, and now my anxiety is creeping in. There is a part of me that feels the Dodgers deserve to win this World Series. Like Dave Roberts said, this is their year. But I don't know. Now that I actually looked at the Rays lineup, look how they've been playing. Now I'm starting to get a little worried. I hope these guys don't blow it, but I'm excited. Let's get it on.
Well, and I think as we talked about in the post game show, the or not even the post game show, the preview show for the NLCS, the Braves were at that point the toughest test for the Dodgers. I actually think the Rays are going to be the tougher test out of the two, just because they have some, that they have depth, they have equal-minded baseball philosophies, and obviously there's the Friedman factor. He brought the culture here, and the only caveat is it's just as they've been running around, saying it's the money factor, which we'll get into here in a minute. But all in all, though, I think these are very balanced clubs, and I think it's one of those things that I'm afraid that some Dodger fans they're going to take this Rays team for granted, and kind of look past them, if you will. And I definitely don't think they should. They're very evenly matched, and again, we'll break that all down. Starting off with the rosters, the Dodgers kept the exact same 28-man roster from the NLCS going into today. If I'm honest, I'm not overly surprised by that, just because the one advantage the Rays will have right now is the Dodgers pitchers, aside from Clayton Kershaw, are not on regular rest. The bullpen was used quite a bit in that NLCS, and especially in that Game 7, which was just a mere 48 hours ago. So, that's going to be, I think, a huge advantage the Rays have going into tonight, and getting it going. And then in contrast to the Rays with their roster, they had a couple additions where they went in they went in and added Brett Phillips and Ryan Sheriff to the roster and kept Mr. Franco off. So it's just adding a lefty essentially to that roster and to that pen. So it's I think as we look at these rosters, I think one thing that's going to be huge in this World Series is, as we talked about with Dave Roberts in the NLCS in that Game 7, he was making managerial decisions, and you and I talked about off the air. I think that Dave Roberts also outmanaged Brian Sickner, and I think that's going to be a huge factor in this World Series with Kevin Cash and Dave Roberts making managerial decisions, in part because of the similarity in baseball philosophy. But as we look at these rosters, what stands out to you as far as the Rays go?
Look, what stands out to me is just how unfamiliar I am with them, which, was a problem, I think, in the previous series because the Dodgers didn't see the Braves all season. And I think it's going to be the same thing that's going to happen in this series. They haven't seen the Rays. So I do expect this series to start off a little slow, to make that boxing match illusion. I do feel you're going to see these teams, fill each other out and see what they got. And that's just what also kind of scares me is that element of just how unfamiliar I am with these Rays. I look at at that lineup, at that roster, and yes, now I recognize a couple of names, but they don't come off to me as world beaters. So for them to have won that division that they won, the AL East, and then to beat the Yankees, it kind of makes me think, well, then this team must be good, even though I don't recognize any of the names.
No, and I think for those not familiar with this team, there's some proven guys there in Mike Zunino and Hunter Renfroe, in Manuel Margot, who we'll talk to here in a second, Kevin Kiermaier. There's some proven names there, and then there's some non-household names that are just coming through up. The G-Man Troy, who's obviously getting a lot of praise throughout this postseason because of his panda-like flexibility. Randy Aro, I can't say his damn name. Aro, you say it again, Juan? There we go. Who, hell of a story. That dude is, if you want to talk about a roughneck grinder guy, that's your guy right there. And Brandon Lowe, Brandon Lowe is a really good second baseman, really good defensive second baseman, hits left, and he's going to be a cumbersome out for these Dodgers. Obviously, we all know what Manny Margot brings into this because he had his fair share of highlight reel catches this year and home runs. But that left fielder and Randy, that dude rakes. And I think it's going to be key that the Dodgers keep those three guys contained, because obviously we talked in the last series where Freddie Freeman and Acuna and Ozzie Albies were the guys that they needed to kind of keep contained. And for the most part, they were able to keep Acuna contained. Ozzie and Freeman had a pretty good series. I think in order for the Dodgers to win this series, it's going to be imperative that they keep those three guys contained because it eliminates the probability of home runs from coming from that three spot. But also, if the other two come on and Randy's hitting home runs, those are RBIs. So they have to be able to contain those guys. But also, the bottom half of that lineup, they all can hit too. They like to play small ball. They grind out as far as the thing goes. And again, it's a similar baseball philosophy as the Dodgers, and by design, because Andrew Friedman was there. They built similar rosters, and they look at the intangibles as far as what entails them being in that lineup. So, and that's the other kind of the comparable, if you will, is both of these teams don't really have a set lineup. They're able to plug and play different players every single day and situationally. So that's going to be interesting to see. And again, it comes back to that managerial chess match that we're going to see throughout the series. I'm not expecting this to be a short series. Some folks who shall remain nameless think that this is going to be a short series. I definitely think this is going to be a 6 to 7 game series. If it stays at 6, it benefits the Dodgers. If it goes 7, unfortunately, I think that might benefit the Rays, just because they can also grind it out the same way. But for the Dodgers to put these guys away, the sooner the better. And I think it's going to be a 6-game series as far as that goes. But I was just kind of curious. As we look at the Dodgers lineup, for you, for this particular Dodgers roster and lineup going into today, like we talked about, there's not really like a set lineup, if you will. For this game one, who are you looking forward to kind of stand out and kind of get the thing going?
Well, I think you have to go with the leadoff guy. The leadoff guy is the one who sets the tone. So I think it's huge for Mookie to come up big in this series, not only because he's the leadoff guy, but he also was in the American League. So if anybody's going to have any type of familiarity with these guys, it's going to be Mookie. And I think the Dodgers are going to rely a lot on Mookie passing along information. What does he know about them? And, and he all normally does that. Anytime you watch a Dodger game, even if he doesn't get on base, the minute he's walking back into the dugout, he's talking to everybody, telling everybody, what is he seeing? What is he seeing? So, especially for tonight, to get things started, is Mookie Betts.
No, and I agree. I think Mookie's been getting hot, and I hope that that day off doesn't really play a factor in the heat, if you will. Same with Corey Seager, same with Justin Turner. Like all these guys, kind of they were starting to wake up, and I think and I'm hoping, and that'll be interesting to see going into today, because obviously you're coming off of this gigantic high in Game 7. Like you said, the last day and a half, okay. Like now we're remembering, the task at hand because there's 4 more that need to be taken care of. Interesting tidbit: the Dodgers led the majors in scoring and home runs in the regular season, and while they didn't walk as often as the Rays, because the Rays obviously walk more, there's a far greater gap between those two teams as far as strikeout rates. So the Rays ranked second with a 26.9 strikeout percentage, and the Dodgers were 28th at 20.3%. So that's going to be interesting to see, especially because going into the pitching depth, the Rays have a really good pitching staff. And I've said this before, I'm a traditionalist in the sense of in order for you to win a World Series, you have to have 3 good starters in order to be able to carry that team. And from there, if you have a deep bullpen, if you're able to maintain bullpen games, that's going to be key. And the Rays have that. The Rays for sure have that in Blake Snell, Charlie Morton, and tonight's starter, Tyler Glasnow. Now, as far as their bullpen, they also have a really good bullpen. Again, they're not household names. They're not the craziest of names, if you will, but they get the job done, and they're a really good set of pitchers. So it's going to be fun to see, again, that chess side of how the Dodgers match up with their situational guys that they're going to put in there, the Edwin Rioses of the world, who hasn't had all the greatest, of success with the pinch hitting thing. But again, he did hit that home run. We're going to have to see Kike Hernandez, again, another pinch hitting guy, come up big. Guys like that against this deep bullpen. And again, with the Dodgers, in contrast, they've been kind of figuring out on the go through the NLCS and now which guys they're going to want to rely on in the bullpen. For you, who do you think is going to be the key guy in the bullpen for the Dodgers in order to be able to get that series victory?
I'm going to go with Blake Trenton. It seems to be a popular choice for me, but only because he's a veteran. And I think because he can have some filthy movement on his pitches, he's not a hard throw. I mean, he throws hard. He throws hard.
He hit 100 a couple times in the NLCS.
Yeah, so he throws hard, but to me the movement is what is the difference maker. So when you have somebody like Brusdar, even though he throws 100 miles per hour, as Fernando Tatis Jr., if someone times that, Brusdar's providing all the power. He's providing everything. So you get a good chunk of the barrel of the bat on that, and it's going to go. So for me, if Blake Trinan is on, it changes everything for you because you can use him in the eighth. If you're not sure about the ninth, what you're going to do with the ninth, you can go. So he adds a lot of flexibility if he is on. Now, if he is not on, it's a different story. I am concerned with him with runners on base because his pitches have so much movement. And, I mean, are the catchers going to be able to keep that ball in front of the plate? So I think in the bullpen, Blake Trinan is going to be huge in this series.
No, and I agree. I think Blake, it's going to be interesting to see if they go to him today because they used him in 3 consecutive days. And obviously the day off gives everyone kind of a little bit of a reset. But, relievers are wired a little differently as far as that goes as well. For me, the guy that I think is going to be huge because, again, kind of going to the philosophy component, the Rays don't look at their pitchers as a traditional starter or a reliever. They look at them as guys that get outs. And the Dodgers kind of do that to a certain degree. The only caveat is that Friedman came into this organization with established starters, and they know how to ride those horses. So, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see that matchup as far as the managers handling that because Kevin Cash has no problem pulling a guy right away. So, and whereas the Dodgers, historically, there's been a little bit of an issue there because they look at the stats and the analytics a little more so than a lot of teams, and that's where it kind of remains. So it's going to be interesting to see that. But for me, the guy that I think is going to have to come up big is Julio Urias. I think Julio is, I think for tomorrow, I think they'll end up doing something similar to what they did in 7, which either start Tony or Dustin and give him a couple of innings and then go to Julio and just kind of let him eat the brunt of the innings. And I think that's going to be what to expect tomorrow. Interestingly enough, before we look at the pitching matchup for Game 1 tonight, the Dodgers had an MLB best 3.02 ERA in the regular season. So again, that's where it's at. But interestingly enough, both clubs have posted a 3.36 ERA this postseason. So it's a lot more even keel than people I think realize, but a lot of it is because of this odd pandemic season. We haven't really seen anyone outside of our region, not even division, just region, because everyone played in their geographical region this year. So that's going to be interesting to see. On top of that, so Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler combined have pitched to a 2.61 ERA. But the Dodgers technically don't have a number 3 after those two guys. Whereas the Tampa Bay Rays, and I always want to say Devil Rays, so I stutter a little bit, so I apologize. A huge advantage that they have is they have Glasnow, Snell, and Charlie Morton, and they have a 2.96 ERA for 54.2 innings. So again, the three starter thing could be a factor as far as the way that this series plays out, and that's again another reason why I think this will be a longer series than a lot of people think, because of those components when it comes to that. Interestingly enough, as we talk about that, 3 other guys for the Dodgers, Dustin May, Julio Urias, and Tony Gonsolin, all things considered, even with how that Game 7 started, they actually have a pretty good combined ERA of 2.92. So, it's definitely going to be a matter of that attrition as far as that goes. And then just so you know, through the playoffs, those three guys, and that ERA number I give you was the regular season. In the postseason, those three guys, if you were to take a guess what their ERA is, what do you think it is?
1.5.
Close, 1.14. So,
Ooh.
you know, it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. And I think, again, the caveat that we come back to is Kenley Jansen. I'm curious to see how they're going to use him in this World Series, and where he goes out to. It was good to see that his velocity was a little up in that last outing that he had, and again, the clean innings was huge. But to your point that you'd made out, it was the bottom half of the lineup. So, and this lineup, in my opinion, is deeper than that bottom half of the Braves. So that's going to be interesting to see. And again, some of you haven't seen these guys this year, even in the postseason, because we were emotionally invested with the Dodgers, and I get it. I totally get it. But these guys can rake, and it's definitely one thing that we can't look past as far as that goes. But I'm curious to hear your take, though, just because we've talked about it a bunch, and we've kind of dived into it a little bit, especially with the end of NLCS Game 7 with Dave Roberts, looking like he outmanaged Brian Snitker. How do you think that impact will go going into this series with what Dave did there, going into this World Series against the very well managed Tampa Bay Ray team?
Well, look, you and I have been begging for this the whole series, the whole NLCS, and that is, throw the book out the window and just manage by feel. And it seemed that Game 7, that was a great game that Dave Roberts actually managed. And I think he managed it very well because he went by feel. He didn't go by book. What I'm concerned about going into this World Series is because they are so unfamiliar with the Rays that they are going to rely so much on whatever they have on their scouting reports, right? And they are going to ignore what they're feeling. So I am afraid that maybe they're going to, and I'm not too comfortable. I don't know if the Dodgers are just going to maybe outthink themselves in this series because of just the unfamiliarity with the Rays.
No, and it's a great point, because again, they haven't faced them this year. There's some guys there that they've never seen before, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Dodgers react, to the field, to the analytics component, especially going into this series with this very well put together Rays team. And all credit in the world to the Rays. Even after Friedman left, they've maintained the same culture, they've built the same way, similar baseball philosophies. So it's going to be an interesting chess match between those two. And all respect to Kevin Cash too. Kevin has no problem telling a guy, hey, you're on a short leash tonight. We're going to pull you after this. And they did it against the Astros. And again, they also, met some adversity in their ALCS with being up 3-0, and then the Astros came back, but they were still able to shut the door on it there in Game 7. And they were able to do it with solid managerial decisions as far as how to use the bullpen and how to use guys in pinch hit situations. So again, it's the two best teams in baseball going at each other, which, in my opinion, we haven't seen in a long time. There's teams that get hot, right? And then they ride through the series. Last year, the Washington Nationals are proof of that. But in this go around, these are arguably the two best teams in all of baseball from each league going against each other. So it's going to be fun. Looking ahead to tonight's pitching matchup, Clayton Kershaw yesterday in his press conference, if you watched it, he definitely said all the right things. He's going into it, it feels like, in my opinion, having been a pitcher myself, with the right mindset and not looking at the past. Because his ERA in the World Series is pretty high. It's a 5.4. And he doesn't have the best record in the World Series either, et cetera, all that stuff. But he said something that stuck out to me that I hope is genuine, that he doesn't look at any of the past World Series starts or World Series teams the same, because this moment is different than that moment. And I hope what that leads to is his Game 1 appearance in the 2017 World Series, where he struck out 11 in 7 innings, no walks, and only allowed 3 hits. Now, again, I don't expect him to go out and drop the hammer and strike out 11 guys. Can he do it? Absolutely. He struck out 9 earlier, and he definitely has the stuff. And I think his last start, the numbers are a little deceiving because of what he did and then what he was charged with when they left him in one guy too soon, right? So all things considered, he kept the Dodgers in the game, but there was mistakes that were made, and that's where they ran into. I'm curious to hear your take because I know that you're not a huge fan of putting all the pressure on Clayton and also kind of riding that horse, if you will. But I'm kind of curious to see what you expect out of Clayton today.
If we're good, here's the thing. This Dodgers lineup, this team you just mentioned, is different. So we don't need Clayton Kershaw to be great to win again. We need Clayton Kershaw to be solid. Now, the issue here is we're facing a very good pitching staff, but we also faced a very good pitching staff with the Braves, right? So the key, and we talked about this in the NLCS, and I think it's the same thing here. It's about limiting the damage. Now, Randy Arozarena has been, it seems like, just been carrying the Rays. If you take out what he's doing in this postseason, the Rays are hitting under 200. Now, the lineup that Kershaw faced in the NLCS, I think, maybe it was a little top heavy on the Braves side, but that seemed like a much more formative lineup. And in that sixth inning, it was a fluke hit that started it, but he limited the Braves to 3 runs. So I think, if he can limit the Rays to 3 runs or less, that's going to be a quality start. That's a good thing for the Dodgers. The key is, I think, again, it's going to be the offense, applying pressure to these Rays and making sure that Kershaw doesn't feel like, I would love to be inside of Kershaw's brain. When that 6th and 7th inning come around, does something happen to him where he goes, I just need to, I start breathing differently. I just need to get out of this inning because of the history of everything that's happened to him in those late innings and games. It would be something that I would love to see. But for me, for Kershaw, if he can keep it to 3 runs or less and give us 6 solid innings, that's the Dodgers should be ecstatic if we get that from Kershaw tonight.
If the Dodgers can get 6 or 7 tonight, I think that's best case scenario, just because of how much they've had to use their bullpen in the last few days. Yeah. Any rest is good rest, and if he can give them a solid 6-7 innings again, I'm not expecting him to come out and get 11 out. I mean, that's especially with this lineup, but also because it's not the same Kershaw that we saw in 2017 or even 2018. So I'm expecting him to come out and try to command the zone and get a lot of ground outs and a lot of pop outs. If he can do that and be efficient with his pitches, best case scenarios for the Dodgers. On the flip side, Tyler Glasnow, who was considered a number 1 prospect by the Pirates organization, obviously is now with the Rays. He is kind of the epitome of your number 1 prospect guy. Went to a prep school in Santa Clarita Santa Clarita, and then went through the system, had this crazy growth spurt like Anthony Davis, where he went from like 6'4" to 6'8", and he knows how to pitch. The key with him though is if you're able to kind of throw his command off and get him a little flustered, if you will, then he has his stuff, but he doesn't tend to trust it, is what I've seen at least in his starts. He's a 3-pitch guy with a 14 fastball and a curveball and a changeup. The thing about his fastball that's kind of scary is he has the downhill kind of delivery because he's 6'8". So that's where I'm curious to see if the Dodgers are able to adjust to that really quickly, because he's got a hell of a delivery and he's got a quick arm. And then the other thing is he's got really big hands, so he's able to hide and deceive really, really well. So he reminds me a lot of a right-handed Madison Bumgarner without the awkward delivery. And I think that's going to be huge because a lot of people forget how big Madison Bumgarner is. That's a big dude. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I think what's going to be key is not getting caught up in that curveball, because he has a wicked curveball. Not as good as Kershaw's when it's on, but it's wicked enough that it has a lot of deception and it locks a lot of guys up. So I think that's going to be key for the Dodgers to get ahead in the count and not get behind in the count, because if they get behind in that count, there's going to be that changeup and there's going to be that curveball, and it coming downhill at you with that level of deception, it's going to be hard to see what's going. But most importantly, if they can keep him on his toes, then they don't have to worry about, oh no, like the bats are cold again. Oh no, we're here again. And I think that's going to be key to doing that. But the issue is though, and again, it's that caveat of the depth, right? We talked a lot about the depth in the NLCS. Both of these teams are deep. If Tyler gets flustered, they have absolutely no problem pulling him and going to that bullpen. So it's going to be one of those things where these Dodger hitters tonight are definitely going to have to adjust on the fly. They're all good enough to do it, but they just, if they can just remember, four more, the task at hand, and they've all been talking that way. The job isn't done. We're ready. This is what we got ready for all year. This is what we're doing. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Dodgers react. And again, these are pretty evenly matched teams. Lineups, bullpens, everything. And one interesting thing, because we heard all throughout the postseason that this Rays defense is legit. Interestingly enough, I would say, and I think a lot of people would agree, that the defenses, I would say, if you were to compare them, it's a push. They're both really good teams. Again, Manny Margot made his catches, and so did Cody Bellinger, and so did Mookie Betts. So it's a push as far as that goes. But what I'm hoping for is, we've talked about this in the NLCS. The Dodgers had more defensive lineups kind of, set up, if you will, but that can still hit. The Rays, there's that's the one, I guess, if you were to say there's a weakness, that's the weakness, where if they go all defensive lineup, they give up a little bit on the offense. But I am expecting this, and I know that you love these games, so I'll let you chime in. I'm not expecting these to be high scoring affairs. I'm expecting to be the 3-2s, the 4-2s, 4-3 games all throughout the series. As far as you see that, how do you expect that to play out?
Yeah, I expect that to play out the whole, especially in the beginning of the series. I expect it to be low scoring because the Dodgers are just so unfamiliar with the Rays. But if it's a low scoring series, I feel very good about the Dodgers' chances, because that's what that Braves series ended up turning into. Those last two games were low scoring games, and the Dodgers came out ahead in those. So I'm fully comfortable with that. I'm hoping that's because these are the two teams with the best records in each league, right? So I expect them. I expect it to be hard to get a hit off of them. I expect it to be hard to score runs off of it. So I'm very excited. I'm eager for it to come in. I just feel that at this point, the Rays had to go 5 against the Yankees. The Rays had to go 7 against the Astros. Okay, so it's not like they're invincible. All right, they've been pushed to the limit. So that's something. Either that tells me that maybe there is a mental aspect of the game that the Rays can falter. Maybe they do lack a killer instinct. And coming back from 3-1, I think the Dodgers are in a good place where they won't get flustered if things go bad tonight. All right, they know they can come back out. So I think you're right. I think it's going to be a long series.
And an interesting point too is the Dodgers have played 10 games in Texas. The Rays have played 0. So it's going to be a little bit of a feeling out process as well on that end. When it comes to like short-term experience, long-term experience on this Dodgers team, there's 123 combined World Series games that have been played. The Rays have 2, and they're all by Charlie Morton. So it's going to be interesting to see how that component goes, because going from the LCS to the World Series, 2 different things, 2 totally different things, 2 totally different environments. Because again, and back to a point that you made earlier about Kershaw's mentality, one thing that I stress, and I talked about it a little bit in the post game for Game 7. Every out, every pitch is scrutinized by those guys, especially when you get to the World Series level. That sometimes they get in their own head a little bit, if you will, but that's a part of the mental side of the game as well, because you have to scrutinize every at bat, every defensive play, every pitch sequence. All of that is going to be scrutinized by these guys, not only on the analytics side, but by the players and coaches themselves. So that's going to be, again, where that chess matchup is going to be, in my opinion, super fun to watch as a baseball purist, just because it's going to, it's almost like the old, Yankees, Red Sox kind of managerial battles, if you will, where, they have these 2 stacked teams and they just have to make them work. The only difference is the Rays aren't household names. And back in those series, everyone knew who played for the Red Sox. Everyone knew who played for the Yankees. And that's where the difference is. So it's going to be fun to see. But as we go in and wrap this preview show up, we'll just kind of get down to the nitty gritty. What is your prediction for the series, and who do you think your MVP is going to be?
Okay, so I am, of course, I'm picking the Dodgers, and I'm going to go with the Dodgers in 7. And I think the MVP in this is going to be Will Smith. I really enjoyed his approach. The way, I mean, he started off at the beginning of this postseason. He was hitting the ball hard, and he was getting nothing to show for it. And it was very easy. I mean, we still have to, I mean, let's not lose sight of the fact that this is his second season. All right. So he's still relatively, I mean, he's close to being a rookie. And you didn't see him put his head down. You know, he still kept swinging. He had that big game in the divisional series with 5 hits, and he came up with clutch hits. And the thing that I loved about him in that NLCS is he changed his approach. When it was a high leverage situation and the Dodgers needed a big hit for him, he didn't swing for the fences, even though he hit a huge home run. What did he do? He went opposite field, and he gave us a 2-run single. So I expect, and especially since he's hitting 5th in the lineup, he's going to be in a lot of situations where we're going to need RBIs from him. And that's why I think Will Smith is going to end up being the World Series MVP.
Great choice. And honestly, it's one of those things, too, when you look through this lineup, it's kind of hard to really nail down one MVP. And, you know, because I'm still hopeful that Corey Seager goes into this series still white hot. You know, even with that day of rest, you know, as we've seen in the past, some guys, they get a little cold after having a day off. In that last series, it went 0 for 4 or 0 for 5, I'm sorry. So, you know, in Game 7. So it's one of those things where it's going to be curious to see how they transition to the World Series. You know, for me, I think the Dodgers win in 6. I think the traditional, you know, 3-starter thing for the Rays, I think they're definitely going to try to exploit it to their benefit. But I think one thing that's going to help the Dodgers is I think they're going to get outstanding starts from both Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler, and also that bullpen. I think that's going to be kind of the low-key MVP is going to be the Julio Diaz effect. I think that if I were to give someone an MVP, it'd be that. However, what I think is going to be the huge catalyst as to what gets the Dodgers over the hump. The Dodgers have a stat of they hit bullpens pretty well. And relief pitchers, they hit them with an 811 OPS. And that was in the regular season. So and again, in the LCS, they hit those Braves relievers pretty hard. In the NLDS, they hit them pretty hard. So I think that's going to be key going into the series. And no one hits those guys harder than Mookie Betts. And that's why I think Mookie Betts is going to be the MVP of this series, because he's just starting to wake up. He's getting it going. You heard in the post game press conference the other night after Game 7 that they know this isn't it. They know that they're ready to go. Everyone's on the same page as far as that end goes. And as a matter of fact, yesterday for optional workouts, a lot of guys would have taken the rest. Instead, all the buses were packed, and they all made it out to the stadium and got their workouts in. And that's a huge testament to Mookie Betts, because they've talked about how Mookie is the first guy at the stadium, the last guy to leave. He's out there doing infield, doing all that. I think all those intangibles that we've talked about are going to carry him to be the Dodgers MVP. Ironically enough, right now as we're recording this, they just dropped the Dodgers lineup card, and your boy Will Smith is DHing. No surprise there. And Chris Taylor is in the lineup at second base, and we have Jock Peterson in left. That's interesting. Justin Turner in third, Muncy at first, Bellinger in center field, Mookie in right, Seager at shortstop. So all things considered, not a huge surprise, if you will. That's been, you know, for the most part of the lineup they've been going with. If there was to be a surprise there, I am surprised that they're going with Jock in the field, and not surprised about Will being the DH. So obviously that's kind of a wash. But Chris Taylor is who I would have thought would have been in left field. So I'm curious to see if that ankle is still an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some question marks in this series. I think there's things that we definitely need to look out for. Chris Taylor's health, also Cody Bellinger's health with that shoulder. You know, is there going to be a residual effect from getting it popped back in? One thing I wanted to add about Kershaw, and that is, I think this is the first time in a long time that Kershaw is not, well, I mean, I don't want to say he's fresh, but this is the first time that I don't think Kershaw is going to be overworked. He doesn't have the workload of a full 162 season. He only made one appearance in the NLCS. He had only made one appearance in the divisional series in the wild card. So I think this is perfectly set up for him to deliver. There shouldn't be an excuse for him. But again, I think the key is going to be putting him in positions and situations where he can succeed. And also this time around, we don't need him to do that much. Just get us into a position where we can bring it home.
Well, and I think what's going to be important is, like I keep talking about the 3 thing with the Rays starters. If the Dodgers can rattle those guys and really get them off their game and get to those bullpens, that's going to be as well of a key, because if you can give Kershaw a lead, and then if you can go out there and get those bats going by getting those first 3 on and getting them playing that small ball, not even, Corey Seager doesn't have to hit a home run every at bat. Mookie Betts doesn't have to hit a home run every at bat. It's just a matter of establishing the offense, getting it going, and giving your starter a lead, because that's going to be the key, I think, especially against these starters, because I do think ultimately I think the Dodgers will rattle those starters, and that's where the caveat of the bullpen comes into play. And if they can do that every single night, because if it's going to be a long series, I don't buy that this will be a short series, that the Dodgers are going to sweep them or win in 5, whatever. The Rays are too good, and like you said, they went through the division they went through, their geographical division they went through, and they got here. I mean, the Astros could have easily put them out of their misery a couple days ago. So, and all credit to them for being able to contain that Astros team that was suspectedly getting their offense going again. But we'll save that for another time. But all the while, though, again, for me, it's going to be huge tonight seeing Kershaw go out there and do the thing. I think it's going to be important that the Dodgers get ahead early. That's not rocket science. But what's going to be important is them establishing and keeping that lead. So that way Kershaw doesn't have to worry about pitching from behind. Because, again, as you talked about the psyche, one thing with Kershaw that I've noticed is when he's pitching from behind, different pitcher. Yeah. Not in the regular season, it's one thing, right? But in the postseason, totally different pitcher. It almost seems like he's never been fully comfortable pitching from the stretch when he's behind in the postseason. So I hope that doesn't end up happening with him as far as that goes in this postseason. But you know what? This is what we wanted. We wanted the Dodgers to get to this point, grind it out, and also not just get a gimme. This is going to be a tough series. And at the end of the day, a lot of people have said, oh, well, if the Dodgers win, this isn't a real World Series. If anything, I feel like this is harder. Just because they had a sprint to get to here, and you literally had to manage everything a little differently. And then now you're in a bubble, and you just played, 7 days in a row. And then prior to that, you played, sequential games as well. So this is for sure harder. The one benefit I will say, as my last point, the World Series being played in the traditional format of 2-3-2, I think is going to be huge for both of these teams, because regardless, even that extra day of rest, everyone is gassed up to this point. So at some point, you just want a day just to kind of reset everything and going into it. So that's going to be key to see how that goes as well. And Dodgers are obviously they have home field throughout, so they'll be the home team starting tonight. So and again, 2-3-2 format, the traditional World Series format. But I feel like all things considered, though, no matter how much we dissect it, it's going to be a fun series. It's going to be stressful, just like NLCS was. But I hope not in the sense that they're down 3-1 and they have to come back again.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, the Dodgers are kind of in a tough situation because everyone outside of Dodger fans want them to lose, right? Now, if they win, you're going to hear excuses that it was a short season. They beat the Rays. They didn't beat anybody. They avoided any major competition. If they lose, you're going to hear, oh, they couldn't beat the Rays. They couldn't even do it in a shortened season. The Dodgers are going to be in a no-win situation. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter, because all that matters is the Dodgers win the World Series and that the Dodger fans care. But so the excuses of, there's going to be an asterisk. We all know which championship, what season deserves an asterisk. All right. So for this, I just don't think that Dodger fans should just focus on them. They should just focus because this is a damn good Rays team. If the Dodgers end up winning the World Series, I agree with you. This is very difficult. It is obvious by the number of times that they mention it, they are uncomfortable being in a bubble. They didn't want it when they were negotiating the beginning of the season. The players' union, because the players didn't want it, they didn't want to do a bubble the way the NBA did a bubble. I mean, let's look at this. The Dodgers were MLB was asked to be in a bubble for a month, and you could see it was already driving them crazy. The NBA did it for what, 2 or 3 months?
I think 3 months.
And you saw mentally what it did to those people. So those people who want to go ahead and dismiss this, they are dismissing it because they're just looking for an excuse not to give the Dodgers credit. I mean, you're going to hear it. If the Dodgers win the World Series, you're going to hear the same criticisms that those Braves teams from the 90s heard, which is, you guys only have one championship to hear for it, to show for all the success you had in the 90s. Let them say whatever they want to say. To me, the most important thing is that the Dodgers go home with the trophy.
And the funny thing is, even if the Dodgers lose, they would still be the favorites going into next year to win it. So it's one of those things where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But you know what? On that note, we'll get this wrapped up. We appreciate you joining us. Please follow us. Our Twitter handles are down here below. By all means, if you want to shoot a message at us during the game, something you want to have us chime in on the post-game show, because again, we'll be here for the post-game shows as well. Follow at Dodgers Beat. If you want any sick Dodgers-related merch, www.bleedlos.com. You'll get a sick shirt like this. I'm sorry I can't go any further higher because of how high my computer is sitting. But again, we appreciate you guys joining us. In the interim, stay safe, and we will see you after tonight's Game 1 of the World Series 2020. We'll see you then.